1914. A cold morning. Somewhere in Europe, a young soldier was writing a letter to his mother. Behind him, giant factories worked endlessly, building weapons for a war nobody could stop. Across Europe, powerful nations secretly prepared for the biggest conflict humanity had ever seen. June 28, 1914. Archduke Franz Ferdinand traveled through Sarajevo surrounded by royal guards and soldiers. The streets looked peaceful. Nobody knew history was only seconds away from changing forever. Then, suddenly, gunshots shattered the silence across the crowded streets. Within days, Europe exploded into a war the world had never experienced before. Young soldiers marched proudly toward battle, believing they would soon return home as heroes. Millions of troops were mobilized across Europe almost overnight as countries prepared for total war. Entire villages burned, while terrified families escaped carrying whatever they could save behind them. Soon both sides became trapped inside endless trenches stretching across Europe for thousands of miles. Mud, hunger, disease, fear, and death surrounded soldiers every single day inside the trenches. Every attack meant climbing directly into enemy machine gun fire across open battlefields. One single machine gun could wipe out hundreds of soldiers within only a few horrifying seconds. Battlefields became endless oceans filled with smoke, mud, blood, explosions, and dead bodies everywhere. Then Germany unleashed deadly poison gas across the battlefield for the very first time. Soldiers screamed in terror, while the gas destroyed their lungs and burned their eyes shut. Soon giant tanks rolled across trenches as modern warfare changed the world forever. Warplanes filled the skies, while explosions violently covered the battlefield below them. Submarines hunted ships beneath the freezing waters of the dark Atlantic Ocean. 1916. The Battle of the Somme became one of the deadliest battles in human history. Thousands of soldiers climbed from trenches and charged directly toward enemy machine gun fire. But machine guns instantly turned the battlefield into complete slaughter, chaos, and unimaginable death. Explosions destroyed the land so badly it no longer even looked like Earth anymore. Far away from battle, families waited for loved ones who would never return back home again. Meanwhile, factories continued feeding weapons and ammunition into the endless machine of war daily. Russia collapsed into revolution as millions of starving people filled the freezing streets. Soon America entered the war, bringing fresh troops, powerful weapons, and new hope to Europe. German soldiers became exhausted, starving, hopeless, and mentally broken after years of endless fighting. Their final attacks failed as the German Empire slowly began collapsing completely from within. Finally, in 1918, the fighting slowly began coming to an end across Europe. The battlefields became silent, but Europe had already been destroyed forever by the war. Millions of graves now covered battlefields across the shattered lands of Europe completely. Entire cities had been reduced into ruins, smoke, ash, destruction, and endless suffering. Families struggled after losing fathers, sons, brothers, and entire generations to the war forever. Germany fell into humiliation, economic collapse, political chaos, anger, and unbearable suffering afterward. And from that anger, another dangerous leader slowly began rising toward absolute power. Europe quietly moved toward another future that would soon become even darker than before. World War I had permanently changed humanity and modern warfare forever across the entire planet. The world had finally learned industrialized death on an unimaginable and terrifying scale. The memories of millions of dead soldiers haunted Europe for many long years afterward. Abandoned trenches still remained as scars across the devastated continent long after the war ended. Millions had died fighting for land, power, pride, revenge, and political ambitions. An entire generation disappeared forever into the darkness and tragedy of human history. Human civilization would never truly recover from the horrifying destruction caused by the war. The horrors of World War I shocked every corner of the planet beyond imagination. But even after peace returned, fear, hatred, and anger still remained everywhere across Europe. Cemeteries across Europe continued growing for many years, even after the fighting had ended. Slowly, another global conflict quietly began taking shape behind the scenes once again. A man named Adolf Hitler was slowly rising toward power inside a broken Germany. The world unknowingly marched closer toward another catastrophic and even deadlier world war, a catastrophe far more destructive, horrifying, and deadly than the First World War itself. And it all began back in the cold summer of 1914.